I don't even know where to start. The past 6 months have been an absolute cluster freak, and it only seems to be getting worse. My best friend since elementary school, who I'll call Alice, passed away in February from cancer. She had a 2-year-old daughter who went into the custody of her mom after she passed away, who I'll call Alexis. Last month, Alexis showed up on our doorstep unannounced, telling my husband he needs to take responsibility for his child and either take custody or start finally paying child support. She says that Alice had told her when her daughter was born who the father was, but didn't want anything to do with him. To answer the inevitable, Alice was a traveling nurse and made a lot of money, which is the only reason I can think of for why she didn't go for child support. During this conversation, my husband had the worst panic attack he's ever had, so we had to end the conversation before I could get more details. My husband's story is, I don't even know humming. He said that Alice's daughter is probably his, but that it isn't what I think. Almost 3 years ago, we threw a large housewarming party as we just moved into our dream home, after I finally finished residency and was set to make real money for once. Alice was in town and set to be at the party, but I was called into work before she got there. I didn't get back till after 3 a.m. Party was winding down, my husband was passed out upstairs, and Alice had already left the party, which at the time I did find strange as we hadn't seen each other in months. My husband claims he woke up in the middle of the night to Alice on top of him, but he passed out again before he could say anything. He claims he never told me because he was worried I wouldn't believe him, which I don't know if I do. He showed me some texts he sent his best friend the next day, asking for his advice about him thinking someone molested him. But if he cheated, he could have had that conversation as evidence, especially since he never said Alice specifically. Ever since the party, he has been very distant with Alice, and after she had her daughter, he would even find excuses not to be around the house when she would visit at all. I don't know if that's because he cheated, or if Alice did actually molest him, and this was his trauma response. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I've known Alice since we were children, and she had never come across as that kind of person. But I've also known my husband for over a decade, and he's not once ever given the inclination of a cheater. He's an attractive guy, and I've seen the looks he gets at the gym, and he's never even given more than a glance. What the hell should I do? How do I figure out what the truth is here when Alice isn't even around to defend herself? She never even implied she liked my husband, let alone want to sleep with him. I told my husband he needs to get a DNA test before anything is decided on the child's part, but in the meantime, he needs to move out while I think about what I'm going to do here. After talking with you, I've come to the realization that my husband is being truthful. My best friend molested him. Several people pointed out that with Alice not liking my husband, if it was an affair, she would have told me when she was dying, if only to separate us. You're absolutely right. I was there, in the room, while she passed. I held her hands for days. We talked about so much. If it was just an affair, she would have told me. But if she molested my husband, she wouldn't have said a word. That's the type of thing horrible people take to the grave. I've also come to the realization that I made a terrible mistake asking my husband to leave for a few days while I gather my thoughts. Not to make excuses, but losing my best friend to cancer, a long cancer fight at that, was brutal. To say that I was devastated wouldn't do it justice. That it happened only 6 months ago, I'm still feeling it every day. So to have this thrown on me, it's like I'm losing her all over again. Either she betrayed me and banged my husband, or she betrayed me and molested my husband. Not only have I lost her, but now I've lost the good memories, an entire lifetime's worth. It was impossible for me to look at him and not also see her, and be struck with the horror and realization of that loss all over again. I felt I needed to be able to break down, grieve, and think without the fresh wave of loss I got every time I saw him. It was wrong of me to ask him to leave. You're right, though, and as of a few minutes ago, I've righted this wrong. I called my husband, apologized, told him I believed him, and begged him to come home. He'll be here in half an hour at most, and I'm going to support my husband the way I know he would have supported me. I've been an off-and-on Reddit user for several years, and sometimes the advice given on subreddits like these can be a bit hit or miss. But today, you guys did good. You've helped me realize not only that I was wrong and being stupid at that, but that I was hurting the person that needed me the most. I was selfish. I have no idea what we're going to do as far as the potential daughter is concerned, but I can assure you we'll deal with it together. It's going to take a lot of time and probably a lot of therapy to grieve this new loss. I feel numb now, as though I'll never cry again. My best friend molested my husband, which means she was no friend of mine. She flaunted it, coming to my house, sitting with me, and gabbing. She brought her child here, trying to rub it in his face, right in front of me. She tortured the man I loved, and I was an unknowing party to it. I feel sick to my stomach over how many times she came over just to hold it over him. I'm honestly at a loss on how to make that up to him. If you all have any ideas, please feel free to give them to me. I think I'll need all the help I can get. Tomorrow, I'm going to take a leave of absence from work, just until we can figure out our next steps, and we can get our heads on straight. Thank you, everyone. Top comment, somebody said. His reaction screams trauma response to me. Not being believed is a victim's worst nightmare. It's hard to be rational with these types of events, but could she have slipped him something? Did she have a history of one-night stands? Could they have been extra chummy because you weren't there and they were drinking? I find it odd she specifically asked about him the first time the baby was over, and that she didn't approve of him. On what basis? Edit. Lawyer up, and then paternity test. Can you have a calm and collected conversation with your spouse that you want to believe in him, but you're also a mess emotionally, and that you need a mediator together? But mostly, lawyers up now. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Somebody said, ask yourself if you honestly believe he would send those messages as a possible future defense. Is he the type of man who would proactively build a defense just in case? Based on what you said here, I'm inclined to side with your husband. Men are never taken seriously when sensually assaulted, and marriages ended for coming forward. The fact you kicked him out says you would have automatically believed your friend, and just doing that may doom the marriage. I could never forgive my wife for that if I was in his place. If he was assaulted and told you the next day, would you believe him and ever trust him again, or would you believe your friend? Her actions show she did something wrong, and his actions show he actively avoided her at all costs from that day forward. A commenter said, women go decades without admitting when they are molested because of fear of people not believing them. I'm going to be honest. Men will go twice as long and preferably take it to the grave because almost always and automatically told it's not even possible for a man to be molested. I know you have to go on instinct, but his story makes sense with the texts he sent his friend. He also would hope to never be around the woman he is sure molested him again, which is why he made himself scarce after the fact. If he's a smart man like you claim, he would not have wanted you alone with Alice basically ever because she could reveal an affair. He would have tried to separate your bond. Instead, he hid because she couldn't really say she molested him. You say she wasn't a fan of his at all. She thought you could do better. So why wouldn't she spin it as he came on to her? It's because she was the one in the wrong. Update. I've received a lot of messages asking for an update, so I've decided to finally sit down and write one out. As you can imagine, after the cluster freak that was thrust upon us, this update isn't likely to answer any of your questions, only present a few more. I want to start by telling you all that I love and trust my husband. My reaction to ask him for space to think, in retrospect, was wrong. But at the time, I didn't know what to think. It was a combination of losing my best friend again, and also the fear that I was losing my husband, that sent me spiraling. Again, it was a mistake to ask him to leave, and I did rectify that in the end. Now, for the update. As mentioned in the original post, I did take a leave of absence from work, and we spent a long time just being together, talking, reaffirming our love for one another, and figuring out what to do next. We of course spoke with a lawyer, and my husband was very adamant about not having anything to do with the child, but was willing to offer financial support as needed. So we agreed to do a DNA test immediately to prove paternity, and then go from there. Didn't know you could buy tests on Amazon, but with only a few weeks processing, it was the easiest path forward since Alexis lives hours away. To everyone's surprise, Alice's daughter is not my husband. We ended up testing twice, both very, very definitive. The first test we performed ourselves as mentioned, and another after Alexis refused to believe the first test and took my husband to court for child support. For a single second, this whole thing made me second guess if my husband was molested, that this could have been her way of forcing my husband to admit to an affair. But after talking with Alexis, I don't think that was the plan. Alexis says that Alice told her my husband was the father under strict confidence, demanding that she never, ever tell me or my husband. We were only ever to be told if Alexis died before Alice's daughter was old enough to take care of herself, so that she wouldn't end up in foster care. The only reason Alexis came to us then, instead of keeping that secret, is because Alice's life insurance wasn't being released yet, and she was out of options. She also felt I should know my husband and her daughter had had an affair. This all reaffirms in my mind that Alice did molest my husband, with the expectation of getting pregnant with his child. She obviously had other partners at the time, since one of them fathered her daughter, but no one knows who. It's clear to me that Alice believed it was my husband. I did suggest Alexis upload a sample to Ancestry, see if any matches pop up, but as Alice traveled all over for work, I don't know that anything will ever come of that. In truth, I've washed my hands of the situation. Alice did enough damage, and I don't particularly plan to be around for any more. My husband and I have gone through a lot of counseling and will likely continue for a while. This whole situation damaged us both, my husband more obviously, and I don't think we'll fully heal for a very long while. To answer a few questions, no, sadly there isn't a hidden diary or text to explain what the hell was going on. My husband and I are not getting divorced. He understands why I reacted the way I did, and has been strong when I was weak before. I've spent the past 7 months being strong while he was weak, so we're considering the whole thing even. We are still madly in love and plan to be together for a long time, still. More on this. No, we will not be adopting Alice's child. If she had been my husband, we would not have been adopting the child. Ultimately, I thank Reddit for setting me straight. There was a massive outpouring of support and corrective advice. To say I got a slap in the face would be a descriptive but apt way to put it. I needed it then, and I thank you for it. To say that you may have saved my marriage is an understatement. I do, however, have some good news. During my leave of absence, while my husband and I rediscovered what makes us love each other the most, I got pregnant. We're expecting our first baby, a girl, in a little over 3 months, and my husband and I are ecstatic. And no, we will not be naming her after my dead ex-best friend. 3 weeks ago, I had to sit with my dad and listen to my mother tell me that she wanted a divorce, because she had been having an affair with a guy she met on the internet for a year now. Now, the first part I understood. My dad had already told me that their marriage just wasn't the same as before, and although he was doing his best to change things up, my mom wasn't caring about it anymore. But the affair part got me really angry, and I felt a bit heartbroken, especially because she kept repeating that she knew my dad didn't deserve that, and how angry she was at herself. So I called my fiancé because I was upset, and I needed to talk to someone. Except that when I told him about it, he just goes, "About that," and proceeds to tell me that he already knew, for 5 months. Because he would often see my mother and the man at a restaurant near his work. I asked him why he hadn't told me about it, and he said that he just didn't know how to do it, and there never seemed to be a right time for it. After that, he said he would give me some space, and we haven't talked much since. I asked him out so we could have dinner and talk, but he just sat in silence and wouldn't even look me in the eye. I have been staying at my parents' house to help my dad, and my fiancé has yet to show up. We're supposed to get married next year, and I thought at first that we should change the date for later, but right now I'm feeling so uncomfortable and doubtful that I even wonder whether we should get married. I love him, but there is this weird feeling that I can't shake, and his behavior through this entire thing isn't helping. Original poster added this info in the comments. A lot of people seem to think that I'm blaming my fiancé, and this is not the case. I'm not blaming him, and I'm well aware of the fact that my mother is the one at fault in this entire situation. My point is that he's been avoiding me even though I could really use his support in this moment. I'm not even wanting to have a talk about what happened because I know we can come back to it once the dust has settled. I just want someone to talk about mundane things and to try and keep my mind away from the entire mess that's going on right now. But it seems I'll have to keep trying until then. Relevant comments. Somebody said, "It's your mother that put everyone in this situation. She wasn't even being discreet. Odd that he saw her so many times, but she never saw him. And very poor timing for her to announce this right before your wedding. I am sorry, you are the one who got royally screwed." Original poster replied, "From what he said, she saw him twice. During both times, she was just talking with the guy, so that's why she probably thought he didn't see anything besides that, except he did. Or maybe she just didn't care." Another question, how much did he know? Just seeing your mom with some other guy at a restaurant doesn't necessarily mean it's an affair. Could be a work lunch, meal, or whatever. Original poster replied, "Sometimes they were just talking. Other times things evolved to hand-holding and kisses." Somebody said, "Him not being there for you during this mess is a separate issue. Seems weird he would just back off all of a sudden. Does he feel like you blame him?" Original poster replied, "I don't think I've given him any indication of blaming him. During the phone call where he told me the details, I was pretty speechless. I just asked him questions of how long this was going on and what he saw. Also the locations and when was the last time he saw it happen. I also asked why he hadn't told me anything. I told him we needed to talk in person and just kept him updated on the situation through texts. When we went out for dinner, he was already acting kinda weird, and to be honest, I felt weird too, so I decided to talk about other topics before we could have a proper conversation. He just kept mostly to himself and would answer more than talk, and I decided to drop it before it got worse. So now we just talk through very short messages, and phone calls are almost non-existent since he will either hang up fast or not pick up at all. Also, we don't share a place at the moment since he had to move in with a friend for a few months since it's closer to where they work, and we had to adjust our budget to move somewhere close in the future rather than now." Somebody said, "I'll play the devil's advocate. Would you have believed him? What would you have done in his place?" Also, perhaps he thought, "Not my monkeys, not my circus," and he decided that he should not meddle in his in-laws' relationship. Original poster replied, "To be honest with you, I would have believed. As I said in my post, I knew my parents' marriage wasn't in a good place at all. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that infidelity wasn't something that I wondered about, even though I would rather think that my parents weren't capable of that. After a while, you notice things and some ideas become not so far-fetched anymore. So yeah, I would have believed, and I would rather he commented on these meetings he had witnessed and then went to the more incriminating stuff." Update 3 months later. Making this update so I can move on from that. Not a happy update, but here we go. After making the post, I realized that maybe I was being accusatory and that I should try being more open with him. I invited him to my place so we could have an honest talk, but he didn't show up and instead decided to call me. I was already having a hard time, so this didn't sit right with me, which led to us arguing through the phone and ended up with my now ex-fiancé revealing that he had been having an affair himself with a woman from work. The entire thing had been going on for almost a year, and at first he thought it was just a one-time thing, except it kept happening, and he figured out that he had feelings for her. It was around that time that he moved to his friend's place, so he could take her there whenever his friend wasn't home, which was often. This was why he didn't tell me about my mother's affair. He felt guilty, and he started feeling paranoid. After the whole thing blew up, he got scared and was trying to do damage control, including trying to break up with her. Except he didn't want to break up with her, so it was going to be me instead. We last spoke to each other in November once he finished canceling the stuff that was already planned. He wanted to keep contact in the future, which I denied. I moved closer to where my dad lives. His divorce still isn't finished, but it'll get there. My mother has been living with her boyfriend since the whole thing came to light. I haven't spoken to her since, even though she tried to contact me once I canceled the wedding. I'm still not in a good shape emotionally, but I'm trying to get there. I truly wish no one ever goes through that.